The Joint Recon ends on the 22nd of June. That's today. No more behind the scenes access, no more daily videos. This has been a huge thing for the sport, simultaneously opening up the development race for the fans, but levelling the playing field in the spying game. It really has been a groundbreaking change for such a technology-driven sport. But has it achieved its lofty ambitions? I speak to the team representatives, so Dan Bernasconi from Emirates Team New Zealand, Rodney Ardern from Alinghi Red Bull Racing, and Dylan Fletcher from Ineos Britannia. But I also speak to the Recon themselves to get the inside scoop on what it's been like to be the Cup spies. For myself, and I imagine some of you as well, the Recon has been opening up quite literally a lens into what I've always imagined to be the most interesting part of America's Cup, and that is the development race. And I've been blown away by how many of you have tuned in. So there is clearly an appetite for this sort of information. Now, I'll remember this America's Cup for the Tomas saga, the subtle utilisation of AC-40s for two-boat testing and glimpses of automation and linked controls. Constant main sheet iterations and development from the previous iterations we saw in the last Cup. Plus, there was a real arms race in terms of self-tacking jib technology, which honestly, I had no idea before the Cup began would even really be that interesting of a thing. My AC-37 has already been so much richer for the presence of the Recon, and I hope that's the same for you. But how do the teams feel about the prying eyes and constant press commentary? First, let's see if they got the basics right. Was it better for the environment, and did it improve safety?
So I guess the first thing to ask you about is the environmental and safety aspects of it. Has it had the positive impact there that you imagined?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, as I mentioned, we typically had at least 3 recon boats following us last time. They're all burning fuel. They're not talking to each other. They're not coordinated with us. There were a few incidents that were not ideal. It's ultimately a lot safer just having one boat following you, and you can coordinate with them, and ultimately it's another safety boat if something goes really wrong.
We've been here in Barcelona by ourselves for a long period of time, and so the number of boats on the water didn't really affect us too much. We've had some good recon units who have been respectful of the rules, and we haven't really had to advise them to get out of the way, so that's all been good. As things are heated up with more teams coming to Barcelona, you really notice the difference. So far, so good. Everyone's still being thoughtful of where the boat might be going next and keeping their distance.
Yeah, I think the shared recon or joint recon program has been really successful. Initially, obviously, as you said, it started out with reducing the cost for everyone and the environmental impact and the safety. But I also think that we've really benefited, or the Cup has really benefited from the engagement it's given, fans, as you say, access to all the teams. And every day we go sailing, pretty much now there's always reports being put out. You're making these videos. And I think, I think it's had a real positive impact for the sport.
In AC-36, my channel got roughly 3 million views, a smidge under. But in AC-37, already, without a single AC-75 even racing, the channel's got over 3.5 million views. So, to me, it has been immediate success. But it's not just my channel, looking at the America's Cup channel as well. Early doors, there were 2, 3, 4, 5,000 people watching a daily recon video. And now, each day the boats are training in Barcelona, we have 30, 40, 50, 100,000 views just watching teams train with no racing. It's also been really good getting to know the individuals, the daily interviews, just to spread the knowledge of those involved with the Cup beyond the sailors themselves. Now, the Joint Recon was Dan's brainchild. So, has it lived up to his expectations from a media perspective?
Yeah, I think it's been picked up really well. And you're a great example of that. He's making a good use of the recon footage. I think there's still potential for more. There hasn't been a lot of sort of really detailed statistical analysis of the data. I think there's a lot of data out there in terms of hours sailed, hours of breakdowns versus hours of useful time on the water, miles sailed, speeds, weather conditions sailed in wind conditions. And I think that would be really interesting data, but obviously it takes time for someone to compile all that.
Here at Mozzy Sails, we did really try to do that. However, over time, as people started using the AC40s, which weren't always reconned, and then you had the free text element of the recon report, so things got a little bit messy in terms of tracking it. I'm sure if we really wanted to, we could have written the code for it, but it just became so time consuming. I think in the future, if that information is pulled straight into a database without a kind of free text entry, then it could be a really great resource for seeing where the different teams are at. Essentially though, this is reconnaissance. So did it actually get the information the teams were looking for?
Yeah, so good question. I think that there's certainly times when we felt as though we haven't got the recon we've wanted out of maybe all the teams, or we'd want, I don't know, some specific shot or something that we get a little bit more of. The flip side is that there's obviously a lot of more access that the recon teams get than we would. So like the fact that they're able to be on site, and I think it's also valuable the little interviews at the end of the day. People occasionally slip up, or you hear a little bit of information that otherwise you wouldn't hear. So I think it probably balances out, and overall it's definitely positive.
If you're sending your own team members off to observe other teams, you know exactly what you're going to get. You discuss with them, we're looking at this, that, or the other thing. Here, it's a little bit more cat and mouse. You don't really want to tell them or any of the other teams, because any requests we make to the recon unit is part of our shared calendar. So as soon as you tell them what to look for, then everyone knows, oh, they're all interested in this or that. So that part of it, you don't want to give away too much. And then again, there's not that many people in the world really who have experience with these boats, so they don't necessarily know what the key features might be and what they're looking for. So they've been educating themselves, even though we had discussions about trying to, let's say, increase the level of knowledge within the recon units. It's sort of a two-edged sword there, where you want them to do better on one hand, but then on the other hand, you don't. So you just live with it.
I mean, we had a really good recon team in the last Cup, and it's nice working with people and that you've selected. So that's something that we miss. We could afford to have one recon team in the last Cup, and so we sort of moved them around, which is, it's expensive, and you often get it wrong on the dates. You're trying to sort of pick up rumours from the wives' network of who's going to be where, when. So whilst the quality was good, the quantity was lacking. I think we really, as a design team, we really appreciate just having that real regularity of updates. We know every single day a team has gone sailing, how many hours they've done. We know straight away if they've got something new on their boat. You can follow the progression. You can see what they've tried and then when they've stopped testing something. And it's really just that sort of continuity of coverage, which has been the big breakthrough for teams' point of views, or at least for our team.
When everyone's spread out all over the world, of course, it's going to cost a fortune to fly someone to Pensacola and rent a rib and be there for a week or two or a month, and you never quite know what they're going to do that week. They might be on holiday, they might be looking at sails, and you're interested in foils, and it's just, let's say the recon is the day in, day out part of it is given a good steady coverage all the way through.
From those responses, it does seem that the recon has vastly improved the consistency of the information feed they get about the other teams. But clearly teams are used to working with people they trust, and it looks like there is an area for improvement here. And we'll touch on that later from the reconners themselves and the ideas they have. But whilst we've got Dan here, I couldn't help but ask him what he's seen in the recon media, which has particularly caught his eye.
Yeah, I mean, just last week, actually, we saw on American Magic. They've got these cyclone cockpits which are quite inboard, and they were testing a sort of honeycomb mesh over the top, which, yeah, I mean, that was interesting. Sort of got us diving for the rule book and wondering how legal that was. So yeah, that was interesting.
And a full array of telltales within the cockpits as well.
I guess to test whether that honeycomb is enough to sort of act as a rigid cover, a solid cover, whether it's doing the job that they want it to do.
Now, I'm a sceptical person, and when I see a set of rules being written between two competing teams, I'm constantly asking myself, what is it about that rule which is benefiting one team or the other? Thinking about recon, naturally you think, well, two narratives really. First of all, that Team New Zealand have the longest time to develop their boat, so recon really helps them in that they've got time to react to seeing what the other teams do.
I hadn't thought of it like that. It's true to some extent, but I mean, we were sailing ahead of everyone else because we've got a much longer shipping window than anyone. We've got to get to Barcelona, and we've all got to be competitive for that preliminary regatta. I mean, okay, it doesn't matter points wise to us, but it matters sort of from a psychological point of view. I think everyone's going to want to put their best foot forward there. So no, I don't really buy that it helps us more than anybody else. Everyone was testing smaller boats, whether AC40s with custom components or other LEQ boats, on a similar sort of schedule. It's not like we were much behind everyone else on that.
And the second narrative I think about is, well, Emirates Team New Zealand were a step ahead of the rest in the last Cup. Do they want to dumb down the recon by pooling it centrally to limit the information the other teams can get about them?
And then your other point, the recon's not good enough. Well, I mean, to me, it's been really good. I can't speak for what other teams may have had in the last Cup, because I'm not privy to that. But I think we've got a pretty good bunch of reconners. They're all professionals, all take their job really seriously. They can, the boat drivers get in the right positions. They've got good cameras, and unlike the last Cup where they're kind of standing outside the fence or trying to find a vantage point, here they actually get access to go into the base forecourt when launching. So often get much better perspectives. So no, I disagree.
Critically though, which teams would keep recon if they're in a position where they're writing the rule? And if they do keep it, what might they change about it to improve it?
Yeah, for sure. If we're involved next time, my vote would be to keep it. I think it's gone really well. I think there'd be some tweaks. Let's look at up-speccing the camera gear, better gimbals. Now that kind of the concept's been proven to produce good footage, then should we go to the next step and have cameras mounted on boats?
Yeah, I'd certainly keep the shared recon. I think it's like anything, we'd like to see a little bit more detail, and for me it's always the sort of thought process that the recon teams are working for everyone else. So they're there as if they're like down in Team New Zealand down at the moment, that they obviously are looking at all this recon, so they want as if they've got their own reconners there. So maybe a little bit more of that. But all in all, I'd say it has been really good.
Now, Rodney from Malingi Red Bull Racing also said that they keep the recon, but I think the more interesting part of his response was about how it could be improved, talking about the utilisation of this recon boat as a resource.
Seems like a little bit of a waste when, if that boat was here, then it's not available for other teams. Like if there's a guy in Europe at another regatta, he can swim by and come and watch us. Or if we've got a guy in New Zealand, he can jump on the boat once or twice a week. Or if someone wants to travel to Pensacola, they can do that and jump on. And it would actually give the guys in the recon unit another perspective. Maybe they get some education by someone being there from another team, and maybe there's occasion where there's one or two opposing team members in town at the same time. But, I think some things could be opened up a little bit to make it a little more interesting and exciting.
I really like this idea, and I think it could be improved even further. Now, if I'm understanding it, I think what he's saying is the teams could put their own staff on the recon boat for, a quota of days. That would enable them to get first-hand experience of what's going on, to see for themselves. But it would also allow them to kind of mentor or guide the reconners and improve their skills through feedback from a team member. Let's hear from the reconners themselves about their experience. What is it really like to be on the water chasing cup teams day in, day out? Now, you've just spent 2 years chasing America's Cup boats in some incredible locations. Do you have any particularly good memories of your time as a recon?
The best memories are the time shared with and getting to know team members, some of whom are childhood heroes.
And the strong wind days, seeing the boats ripping over 45 to 50 knots.
In-house or split-tack jibe drills with the other teams.
What were some of the hard parts of being recon, apart from obviously very long hours?
There was a lack of notice.
Lots of time wasted not knowing what the sailing schedule will be, leaving us on the back foot.
Access to water and toilets at almost all bases was limited.
Is there anything you think could be done to improve the conditions for the recon teams?
Different teams have different recon vessels. They don't always meet the technical requirements. Without getting into detail, there's a big power imbalance between the teams and the recon, which makes it very difficult for recon to negotiate what we think are fairer standards and working conditions.
Who were the best team to recon?
Ineos was the best team to be assigned to. They had one of the best chase boats, were most considerate in terms of notification. They provided shade and water dispenser at the allocated recon square. They cleaned and refueled the chase boat.
If recon is kept, how do you think it should be improved?
Every recon unit must have the same recon vessel, protected Chase 300 with suspension seats, 2 engines and a sunshade.
We understand that the rules are designed for the recon not to be as good as it could be, but for the sake of progress, better quality would be in the interest of all parties.
Currently, the communication is through a shared sailing calendar where teams would submit requests on what they would like. If this was made anonymous, then it would be less revealing for the teams and perhaps encourage more direct requests, allowing the recon to be more targeted in their approach rather than guessing and creating a potentially false narrative.
Improved communication and feedback from recon reps would increase the quality.
I think it's reassuring to hear that there are similar ideas to improve recon from both the reconners themselves and from the cup teams. One key area is improving the link between the recon staff and the teams themselves. I think Dylan mentioned that they'd like the recon to be acting more like they were specifically working for the teams, and the reconners themselves want more feedback. Particularly like Rodney's idea to put staff on the recon boats to follow other teams. Now, obviously he's saying this from a perspective of both getting out there and seeing the boats firsthand, and secondly being able to coach and improve the reconners. But I think from a fan perspective, this could be really interesting if those staff were then available for interview after spending a day on the boat following another team. They might not want to give like their top tier kind of secret what they've seen, but I think it will give you kind of like a third party objective view from an expert on what's been seen that day. And I think that could help the narrative. That's it for me, but don't worry. Just because the recon ends, we've still got a heap of backlog to go through. It was such a hectic April and May with all the boat launches. Some really detailed stuff to come on that with Tom and Rob. And then looking at other ways to get you closer to the Cup over the summer as well. And then finally, once we're into the racing, we can start talking about tactics and technique and all that good stuff, just like we covered in the Cup last time round. So, thanks very much.